Rob, thanks so much to have you here today, Rob. So I guess, Rob, you're one of these guys that just, like many people, when I flick on my phone, I see you appear on my podcast every day. You do have a lot of impact on many people's lives. But I guess I wanted to kind of hook into your world, Rob, and see what on earth was going through your mind when the world shut down, Rob, because you had to make decisions fast. What did you do?
Yeah, so I'll give you an honest account. So at first I was like, nah, this is a load of rubbish. It's never going to happen. And I was definitely in denial phase. There is no doubt. Because let's be honest, it is true to say, isn't it, that 99% of the things we worry about never usually come true. And the lockdown, quarantine global virus, let's be honest, that is a bit of a unicorn. I even remember having dinner with someone who said, look, in a few weeks, we're all going to be quarantined. And I was like, no way. But there was a time in that denial phase where I thought, you know what, if I don't make a plan and it does happen, even if it's really on the outside chance, that would be bad business. So I started making some plan Bs and plan Cs and plan Ds just in case. Now, I was already planning to go global with my companies. I was already planning to do online events. So for me, it was really an extension of that. So what I had to figure out is how could we do them much quicker? What extra value did our clients and customers need? How could we do it how could we create this pivot, if you like, on a turn on a sixpence, as they say? Then when it all was happening, there was a lot of fear out there. And some of that fear did transmute into me. I'm normally good at keeping fear away from me. But quite a few people very close to me, business partner, MD, that they were scared, and they won't mind me saying, and that did transmute into me a little bit. But I was also, and I say this with humility, but I also had a little bit in me with the contrarian in me, the disruptor in me, that was actually a little bit like, this could be an amazing opportunity. Now, obviously, the people that die and the difficult things that happen through the quarantine, that is awful. I'm not saying that, you should leverage that opportunity. But you have two choices, don't you, when the world changes? You can either accept that it's worse, or you can try and make the best of it. And I had this quite excited feeling that actually, if we could figure out quickly, and this was important, Richard, it had to be quickly. If we could figure out quickly how to make the best of it and how to see it as an advantage, and importantly, how to add value to our community, how to add value to our clients, because it's not just about what can you do, it's about what you can give and offer. So I started getting up at 3 a.m. instead of 5, working through, created loads of plans, worked through all the partnerships we had, all the new courses we'd want to launch over the next 5 years, and said, how can we do them in the next 5 weeks? And we launched 12 online courses in 11 weeks. We halved our overhead, because we had 95 staff before the lockdown. We managed to halve our overhead pretty much within a month. And our profits have gone through the roof now. I mean, we're making £250,000 a month net, whereas we weren't making that on a nearly 20 million turnover. So yeah, now we're saving that cash, by the way. We still have some creditors like, VAT is a creditor, and the corporation tax is a creditor, and the government allowed us to delay those. And Mark and I have the opinion is we want to get those paid as quickly as possible, because we don't want a false cash position. And then I did lots of polling, lots of surveying. I did 3 videos a day. I really upped my content, and you said that before, Richard. And one of the reasons I did that was obviously because I wanted to look after my clients, give more. I wanted to support them. But I also thought if I could put a lot of content out there and communicate with my clients in real time, I'll find out very quickly what they want and need, and then I'll be able to create these new products. And yeah, it's been good.
I don't know about you, Rob, but I felt like going into this, like if there was like a word of 2020, it would have to be the word pivot. Like everyone wanted a nice pivot, didn't they? And it was really interesting. I think some companies were really struggling to work out how they can diversify their models, and equally how they can diversify connecting with your audience. But I just felt like at the time you had just been trying to smash it, getting right back in touch, through the virtual world. But could you talk to me a bit about that, Rob, about how you, because you've done a lot of live events where you have face-to-face contact.
Yeah, so obviously pivot became a a buzzword, and that's no problem to me. Now, I think if you, I like this saying, don't get ready, be ready. So whilst you could argue we did a very fast pivot from face-to-face to online, in reality, we'd been planning the diversification of that for many years. Mm-hmm. Because to go from national to global is much harder and slower to do it by doing face-to-face events, because you've got to build infrastructure in each country or partnerships in each country. But to go global online, it's only time difference issues. Mm-hmm. And you can create an online course and it could be studied in 200 countries. So we were already planning that and preparing that. Now, I've had lots of conversations with my MD and business partner and mentors, etc. And I think a lot of people close to me would give me the feedback that sometimes I probably do too many things. And they would give me the feedback that, Rob, maybe if you just did one or two less things, then you could focus more on the thing you're doing and that could grow bigger. Mm-hmm. But my argument is always, yes, but if the world ever changes, yes, then we need backup, business models or income streams. So we have a podcast agency. And when we launched that agency, the profit was really good. And over time it settled, and it probably in its own isolation wasn't taking the world, wasn't setting the world on fire with its profit margins and what it brought to the business. But as soon as the lockdown happened, that agency had all the assets and resources to create and deliver all of our online courses. And a lot of the people who work in our podcast agency ended up becoming live stream facilitators and hosts for all of our global online events. So that helped the pivot so much quicker. Whereas if we didn't have all that resource, it would have taken us 6, 10, 12 weeks to make that pivot. So I think it's really important that you're always thinking, what happens if the world ends? What happens if there's massive regulation? What happens if there's a huge lawsuit? What happens if I become really ill or demotivated, or I just lose my passion and enthusiasm for the business model that I'm in? And what happens if that happens overnight? And if you have no plan B or plan C, then you have to start again. And so I'm always doing stuff in the background. So I think there's a company called Google X, and I think the purpose of that company is to play around with all this new tech and these new business models, even with the outcome of proving that they don't work, so that the ones that are left can be launched. Because if they're not doing that, they're not building their future revenue streams. And of course, the world changes every 10, 15 years. And, if you think about social media, is probably a 15, 20-year phenomenon. And, if you think about AR and AI and VR and Internet of Things and crypto and all that, that's all quite new. So we were already incubating a lot of these things that were ready to work in this lockdown. Now, we didn't know it was going to be a lockdown. Maybe it's a recession. Maybe, like I said, it's regulation, disruption, competition. But if you want to survive and thrive in business and continually grow, if you cannot get disrupted by anyone else other than yourself. And so you have to make plans in the future to disrupt and outcompete yourself. Because if you don't do it, someone else will. And that's why I like to have three business models on the go, where one of them is my main one, but one I'm incubating and one I'm kind of doing like 20% of my time. So I have this model called 70, 20, 10. 70% of my time are on my main thing, 20% of my time on my secondary thing, and then 10% of my time is, what business model is of the future. So, stuff like TikTok and cryptocurrencies and blockchain and VR and other tech, that would be like a 10% future thing that I'm just working out. Okay, how can we move into that? How can we become a technology company? So yeah, there's some of my thoughts on it. So really it sounded like, we did the biggest pivot ever, but we didn't really. We were already 3/4 of the way turned. Absolutely. Don't get ready, be ready.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, Rob, when you talk about all your ideas, if my colleagues were here, they'd probably talk about how, disruptive my ideas can be in business. But I do actually think you have to have someone in the business constantly pushing things forward, constantly being prepared to fail. And I don't know, do you relate to that on a day-to-day, Rob, of being the one in the office that's constantly getting battered with different things?
Yeah, I think my team would probably say, if I wasn't around, that I'm impatient, that I expect things to be done maybe a bit quicker than is realistically possible. I wrote a book called Start Now, Get Perfect Later, and I'd rather do that than procrastinate and never get started. Obviously, I want to create great products and services. I want them to be amazing. Don't get me wrong. But if I have a choice between getting them perfect before I start or start now, get perfect later, it will be that. I'm not afraid to change my mind. So if we've made a decision, but then I think it's better to change that decision, I will. And that can frustrate people because we were supposed to be doing, we'd previously agreed, all of that kind of stuff. I suppose I probably get up the earliest. I'll probably come up with most of, or many of. I don't want to take anything away from my team because they're amazing and they really did stand up and deliver in this lockdown. And honestly, some of them have just made their whole careers, and I'm really grateful to them. But I think they would probably say that, I have a lot of the ideas. They'd probably also say I have most of the bad ideas.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm not scared of having a bad idea. I'm not scared of putting it out there because you never know. A good idea could not be good. A bad idea could be the best idea ever. So I don't have to own ideas. Look, I love business. I love entrepreneurship. I love building my personal brand. I love helping, start and scale up entrepreneurs. I just love it. And hopefully that passion and enthusiasm and excitement, hopefully that comes through.
Oh, completely. And I think, Rob, there'll be absolutely thousands of people tuning in to watch how motivational your podcasts are. For those that are feeling absolutely crushed at the minute, people have had plans, they've fallen through the floor. What should the message be to them, Rob?
Right. So to be crushed, let's define crushed. To be crushed, you'd have to perceive that you are defeated, you lost, or that clearly you expected things to be way better than they are. And I've spoken to probably 75 start or scale up entrepreneurs in the last 10 days. I've done a lot of one-to-one phone calls and I've helped a lot of people. And one thing that I realized is a lot of people have not changed their expectations since the lockdown.
Yes.
And I think that that's harming them. Now, let's be honest, if you have not put your kids up for adoption in this lockdown, then you've won. Because it's just really hard for anyone homeschooling. If your business is still going and, maybe you made net zero and you didn't make a loss, then that's got to be seen as a win in this lockdown. And I think if you've got really unrealistic expectations or, compared yourself to others who thrived in the lockdown, we can't all be Amazon, can we? And all have e-commerce businesses. So being crushed is perceiving that you've done terribly, which means you must have expected to have done really well. So I would say set your expectations a bit more realistically. Don't beat yourself up. Don't compare yourself to others. And always look for the upside opportunity. Now, this is a hard one for humans to get their head around because we're emotional creatures and we're kind of evolutionarily wired to be more focused on pain and fear than pleasure. Survival instinct is to be more attuned to fear, to be in survival mode. But the problem with that is it's not an opportunity-seeking mindset. So logically, we all know, I hope, that everything has an upside and a downside, even anything that's traumatic or difficult. So what are the upsides of the lockdown? Maybe you connected more with your family. Maybe you reevaluated the direction of your business. Maybe you really reduced your overhead. You were able to furlough staff. Maybe you pivoted your business model. Maybe you connected more with your customers by finding out what they want. Maybe you created a better product and service. Maybe you had got a bit lazy or a bit complacent, and maybe this has, made you a little bit more humble and, less complacent. I could go on and on and on. Maybe you set up an online business. Maybe you started those one or two extra income streams you've been planning to for years, but didn't. Maybe you managed your money better because you had to be more frugal. But I could go on and on. Maybe you started researching the business models that work in a lockdown and you actually find out that they work after a lockdown. So really, how you deal with being crushed or defeated or deflated or depressed is to understand that you're only looking at downsides when you're in that mindset and to look at the equal upside. So I've wanted to go global for years, and we've always done too well in the UK to force us to go global. And to be honest, if I'd been doing really badly in the UK, that probably would have forced me to go global. The lockdown made me fear not being able to do business in the UK because of the quarantine and the lack of face-to-face. So that fear drove me to start all these online courses that I wanted to start years ago. And 3 months down the line, we have 12 new 12 new online courses. And in my mind, that would have taken 3 to 5 years to create before the lockdown. So there's the upside opportunity. But an entrepreneur, if you want to define yourself as one, an entrepreneur is someone who can spot the opportunity and have the courage to deliver the opportunity and not get sucked into the pessimism and the negativity. Because in reality, there's just a movement of pessimism from one place to another. And I know that the pessimism and the negativity, it was on a global scale. But, things just move and change. They don't disappear. So yeah, it's seeing the upside opportunity in the downside.
Absolutely. One thing we found really useful recently, Rob, is just getting back to defining the business plans again. What is going to grow? All those new areas that you haven't had time to focus on. So I'm very excited for the future. But I also think, Rob, like for many, I do actually think they should be taking time out to think, am I in the right job? Do I need to do something completely different? Am I in the right business? Do I need to do something completely different? Are you seeing that within your network as well?
Yeah, look, one gift the lockdown could have given someone is to reevaluate their direction, their purpose, to think about if they're on mission and on message and if they're in the right business. Now, by the way, if you just want a little stress test, a little bit of feedback to know if you're in the right business or not, just see how you feel about problems as they arise. Mm-hmm. Because if you want to throw the towel in all the time, that says two things. One, that's a habit that you've built up. That's sort of like maybe an emotional weakness or a trigger in you, and be careful not to repeat that pattern across your life or across your business models. But two, it's a stress test if you're in the right business. Because a good friend of mine who's just joined in live, Neville Wright. So he had kiddie care and he built it up from a tiny shop, 35 years ago, was it, Neville? In my hometown in Peterborough. And he built that up to be the largest online retailer of, prams, pushchairs, kiddie related products and services. Now, do you think he went through challenges and difficulties and disruptions? Do you think he lost stock? Do you think he had problems with currency fluctuation? When he bought this massive outlet, do you think he had, growing pains? Of course he did. I remember him saying to me that he actually at certain points was living in his office. Do you think he ran out of money a few times, put all of his money in? Do you think his retail went through cycles and it had booms and busts? Of course. But he still had this passion, this burning passion for building a great retail company. In fact, Neville's book is called, one of his favorite saying is, the answer is yes. What's the question? Yeah. So Neville is always looking for the yes. So do you think he gave up or cried like a baby or threw his toys out of the pram or went and ranted all over social media every time there was a little problem? No, he didn't. And if you want to do that, that's probably a sign you're not in the right business, or you've got to work on some of your, maybe childlike emotions that are coming through, which, by the way, I believe we all have, myself included. So the lockdown was a good opportunity for a lot of people to reevaluate that. Mm-hmm. So if you're bumping or wobbling or getting a bit lost or frustrated, number one, you have to check how long have you been doing this. I've spoken to at least 10 people in the last 10 days who have said to me, Rob, I'm thinking about giving up. It's not working. It's just not working. I'm not good enough. And I've asked them, okay, what business model you're in? And they've told me, and I've said, how long have you been doing it? And they've said 3 months or 4 months or 6 months. Well, that is not long enough. Yeah. And really, those emotions are feedback to stress test you to see if you're in the right business, to see if you can grow the thick enough skin to be able to deal with the bigger problems and challenges. And if you are getting a bit lost or distracted or demotivated or overwhelmed or frustrated or confused or defeated and all these emotions that, by the way, we all experience, mm-hmm. Tune into why you got into the business in the first place. Mm-hmm. I love property. I love business. I love personal development. I love brand and social media. I love those business models. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Mark and I have endured our hardest year in business we've ever had, even though we're making millions of profit. It has been the hardest year both Mark and I have had professionally and personally, even though it's in many ways been our best year ever. So the problems never go away. They just get bigger, and you just hopefully get more resilience and a thicker skin and grow as a person to grow into your new level. What is your reward for solving a problem? A bigger fucking problem. That is your reward. Sorry, I don't know if we can use expletives on your podcast. Well, I was too late, sorry. But I think a lot of us have this naive fantasy that when we get rid of a problem, the reward is we never get that problem anymore. Now, if we transcend a problem, we never get that problem anymore. We get a bigger one and a newer one and a different one. So your reward for solving a problem is a bigger one. And if you accept that and grow into that and embrace that, actually, that is the only way you get rid of your problems.
Completely. And Rob, I'm so pleased that you said that, because I think one of the things that I've been reminded coming through this whole time is actually I love working with people. I love business. I love solving problems. And someone said to me recently, actually, more of a mentor, they said, actually, what would you be prepared to go to work and not get paid for? And you know what? I would network for months on end, meet people, do business for months, years, just simply for the sheer joy of doing it. So I think for anyone listening, that's actually quite useful advice to work out, where are your passions, where's your heart, to find out, are you in the right place, and is it your natural flow? Because if it isn't, chances are you need to move away from that. Rob, tell me about you getting fed as a person, because you're giving an awful lot of content at the minute. How are you staying fed and nourished with wisdom and good teaching to keep you built up as a business person?
So probably in the past year, this has been one of my biggest struggles or challenges. And I enlisted the help of a therapist nearly a year ago, and that certainly helped. I've always had mentors and coaches. I've always gone on courses and invested in my personal development and my skills and my knowledge, and that always nourishes me. But we just grown at such a size, and some of the challenges that we were enduring were bigger. And I found that in many different areas of my life, I was experiencing them. So having a therapist is one that's really helped. I think in the journey of entrepreneurship, you can lose sight of fulfilling friendships. And I think a lot of your business relationships and they can be transactional. And I'm fine with transactional relationships. And often I've actually got some good friends who are also business partners, but I probably didn't focus enough on having friendships, people I could really open up to, where I felt safe. Because even though I've got some good business friendships, there's things you wouldn't want to discuss on a personal level. So a therapist, really close friendships, and I've had some that have come and gone. And I think it's important to keep investing in that area and nourishing in that area. I am a big fan of audiobooks and podcasts, but my Audible app, for some reason, on my old phone just wouldn't work, and I couldn't get it to work. For probably about a year, I didn't listen to an audiobook. And I'm over to the latest iPhone, and now all of a sudden I'm getting through about 2 audiobooks a week, and I've pretty much just finished my third one, in not even 2 weeks, and that's really nourishing me. Actually giving content nourishes me, but I do give a lot. It's not a brag, it's a fact. I do give a lot, whether it's content or one-to-ones, calls, support. And sometimes I don't know when I'm on empty. And I have to get better at knowing that. And so a couple of times over the last few weeks, I've just reset some of my rules, maybe, given myself permission to create some new boundaries, etc., which I think is really important. And some people are really good at setting boundaries, and I've noticed in some areas of my life I'm probably a bit soft and not so good at that. Adrian has said here, Rob, why was a therapist different to having a coach or a mentor? A coach will usually use a system to get you to actions and outcomes. A mentor will give you their experience of what they've done. But therapy is normally not outcome based. You'd phone your therapist and you'd let out your emotion. You talk through some of your personal challenges. They would look at where depending on the type of therapist, where some of your early formative years and your child, you growing up as a child, how that is repeating its pattern in your adult life. And so I guess more of a support. A mentor you want to listen to, don't you? But a therapist you would talk to. Sometimes I just literally, find out my therapist. She's like, "How you doing?" And I just go blah for an hour, blah. And it's actually How many times can you have conversations with people where they don't interrupt you, they don't judge you, they don't go off on tangents? Sometimes you just need, have you ever talked for an hour straight with someone who is paid to listen or wants to listen intensely, and allows you to talk through and go round and then guides you? I'd never really had that, because when I'd want to start opening up to people, coaches, mentors, or just friends, a lot of people want to talk over you. A lot of people don't know your need to have this catharsis. And so you would never get deep enough into what's going on behind the scenes, whether it's baggage or emotional triggering or limiting beliefs or all those kind of things, which often mentoring definitely doesn't go that deep. And sometimes coaching does if the coaches are really good, but it often doesn't go that deep. And things can catch up on you. The only really way to navigate problems is to deal with them, to not push them away, to confront them, to figure out what they are. And to do that, you need to constantly communicate and converse about them. And I realized that some things started to manifest in my life that I just not got my head around. And they'd manifested over many years, and I just didn't understand it. And I never really talked about it. So, when you feel things bubbling and you feel certain feelings, you're like, I don't know what that is, but like that's there, and you need to go and talk about it. And I think men are worse at that than women. I clearly have more feminine traits because I'm much better at that, and I just blurt it out to everyone. Most of my stuff, most people know. So there's some of the ways I've tried to nourish myself, spending a lot more time with my kids over the last few weeks. If I'm honest, I'm not spent enough time when they were very young. I've sort of bookended where when they were very young, I didn't spend enough time with them. In the middle, I spent a lot of time with them, especially Bobby and his golf. And then up until a few weeks ago, again, the lockdown was I guess a convenient excuse to just focus on business. I didn't make enough time for my key life areas, as well as my key result areas and my income generating tasks. And I feel like I've got a lot more balance now and setting some more clear boundaries and rules, spending a lot more time with my children, which is one of the most nourishing things ever. I mean, my daughter is the most fun person I've ever met. She is the most fun person, and she just makes you laugh and laughs at everything and finds everything funny. And that is so nourishing. And then doing things for you. I probably am not selfish enough as an entrepreneur. I'm not saying that to, go, oh, look at me, I'm a selfless saint. But I don't always put myself first, i.e. saying no to enough things, doing things that I want to do instead of maybe what I perceive other people want me to do. I've probably not been good enough at that. Now, I've been telling people around me that, if you want to be a good mother, if you want to be a good business owner, then, if you want to have good self-worth, then you have to put yourself first. And, you can't give from an empty cup. But maybe I've not focused enough. I love listening to vinyl. So I have a nice hi-fi system I've built up over the years. So I went and just, I've got the pair of speakers upgraded from mine are 65 grand. And I just went and listened to them for a couple of hours on the weekend. And I just drove on my own. And I love vinyl. So I've been buying more vinyl. And, when this lockdown happened, I thought I'm going to preserve cash, and I sold some assets, and it didn't really do anything for me. I love going to London, love visiting Alexander McQueen or Givenchy. I love eating at Burger and Lobster. I like having really good conversations with, a lot of my very interesting and famous guests on my podcasts, or people like that have become friends. And I have to make that more of a priority now. And I think in the last few weeks, I've got better at that. And I'm not always good at that. So I would recommend that, anyone listening or watching, you're allowed to put yourself first, because I think you're a better leader, entrepreneur, inspirer, motivator, manager, parent, whatever it is, when you are more full yourself. And I do sometimes default into hustle mode. I do sometimes default into fixing all the problems myself, because I see problems and I know I can fix them quick. So I'm the sort of person, if you tell me something, I immediately want to fix that problem, which of course, in relationships, usually they don't like that. I don't want you to fix me. And I'm often fixing issues with staff members when actually the manager should be doing it or someone else should be doing it. And I am an intense fixer, and I've got to just step back and just let go and let people deal with their own stuff and not always try and fix and change the world.
And Rob, you've been very open about your story from how you began, what motivated you, the old days with the pub and coming through and starting the property venture and then obviously all the massive success thereafter. And now you've been very open about, therapy and your mentors and other things. Do you find that that's really helped you connect with your audience? And, do you think that's why people buy into you, Rob?
I think that's the feedback I get. For me, the most important thing, if me and other people like me are having a following and sharing content, and to a certain degree having an impact and an influence on people, I think honesty of your content and where you're at in your journey. You don't have to tell them everything about your personal life. That's your prerogative to tell them what you tell them and don't what you don't. I generally tend to reveal stuff when I think that it would make people feel more comfortable about their stuff. So I try and make it relevant. I'm not just blurting and crying and bleeding and being vulnerable for the sake of it, which I think a lot of people are. And for me, there's a fine line between it being a gimmick or using it and it being real. So for me, what I've tried to do over the years is just be honest, like not overinflate or underinflate myself. So I had this chat with one of my mentors. I started to feel like when I'm telling people my results, it sounds like a brag. And he says, if it's a fact, it's a fact. A brag is not a brag when it's a fact. So I, stick to facts. And if I'm doing well and winning and everything is going well, that's what you're going to get from me, because that's honesty of where I'm at. If I'm struggling and having a challenge, that's what you're going to get from me, because that's honesty of where I'm at. And I can't teach you something. Well, I can teach you something from a year ago or 2 years ago, or something that is not what I'm going through now, but it is something I know. But it's more real and raw and honest and emotional and compelling if you teach what you're going through in the moment.
And I think, Rob, that's something you lose in the corporate world slightly, because I think it's harder when you sit in a big blue chip to really, and obviously it is, some would argue, is inappropriate to be so honest and open about what's going on, but you get a very different experience of life and business in those type of companies compared to engaging with yourself, Rob, or engaging with a startup. It's completely different.
Yeah. I think ultimately, why would you not reveal what's really going on? Fear of being judged, fear of being criticized. Maybe you perceive it's not what people want, but I believe it's that honesty that people do want. So it's weird at the moment, because in this last year, some of the best and some of the worst things have happened in my life simultaneously, which one of my mentors says is the natural order of the world. Why am I surprised? So to a certain degree, you could get a mixed message, but that is what's going on. So like I said, we have had the best business year of our life, certainly in the last 6 months, making millions, not just turnover, but net profit, but also some of the biggest challenges too, with our biggest property development. Mark and I both issues personally, which have been really disruptive. And, if I'm bragging of all the things that are just going well and giving you one side, or being too vulnerable and everything that's hard, I'm not giving you a balanced view. So I'm just trying to, and by the way, sometimes I'm confused. Sometimes, maybe I give you too much, too little, I don't know. But I think people follow me because they know they get what is really going on. They don't get a performance or an act, or they don't get distance. And not everyone likes that, by the way. Some people want, the influencers who are in a suit and tie with a little handkerchief coming out, or a cravat, power, and using the C word, and everything is, 20x. And, it's all about success and winning and being a billionaire and all that. And that's cool. And that's not really me. So some people resonate more to that than to me. And some people resonate more to me than to that. So I can't say how I deliver my content is right. But what I definitely can say is it's me. And I think the best thing that you can do if you want to be a inspire a leader, manager, is to honor your own individuality. And I think that's the hardest thing to do. So a lot of people say, oh, well, it's all about being vulnerable. I actually think it's about being true to who you are. Mm-hmm. So by the way, sometimes I don't want to be vulnerable. Sometimes I want to puff my chest out and tell the world that I mean business. And you might be throwing all this shit at me, but you know what? I am resilient. And I'm not going to be vulnerable then. I'm going to be strong and commanding and powerful. Mm-hmm. And then other times I need to go into a state of humility because I've made a few mistakes and I've got lessons to learn. And then you'll see a more humbleized version of me. And then sometimes I've got to actually brag a little bit more or tell you a little bit more about what I've done. If you're a new follower and you don't know my podcast is one of the most successful in the country, if not the world, and you don't know I've written 15 books and most of them are bestsellers, and you don't know I've done over 100 million in sales, and you don't know I have hundreds of properties, and you don't know I became a millionaire, almost 10 years ago, 11 years ago to the day, and you don't know all these things, well, then you're just going to look at me and go, well, why should I listen to and follow Rob? So sometimes I've got to be more assertive with my results and my achievements. So it's just about being true and honest and yourself without being inconsistent and overly emotional. Because some people on social media, they're like high, they're low, they're high, they're low. It's all a bit too much. You still got to have that consistent brand and that constant theme running through.
Tell me, Rob, you mentioned your guests and now friends that are coming through from your podcast. You've interviewed startups through to billionaires. What are you learning in terms of, from these podcasts? Are you seeing similar habits and behaviors from these guys, or are there any success traits that you can communicate for us?
What are you not learning? That's what I would say. So I've got asked this a few times, how can I summarize 530 podcast episodes in a 2-minute answer to a question?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Really, all I can do is say you should listen to the podcast. And it's called The Disruptive Entrepreneur, because how could I do it justice to distill that down? So you've asked me and I'm going to try to do that. So definitely entrepreneurs are the world's greatest problem solvers is a common theme. Mm-hmm. And the more people seem to be net worth, the billions, a lot of people perceive they would be more powerful and more greedy and more money focused. That's not true. The more wealthy my guests are, the more they focus on, entrepreneurs being the world's greatest problem solvers. And you tackle the world's greatest problems, and you will make significant amounts of money, and focusing on where the value is, and what needs to change in the world as an act of service for many people, whereas a lot of people have a negative connotation with that. So that's certainly common across the board. I would say an embracing and a leveraging of all the new media outlets that are out there. So many of them are huge on social media. Many of them have used media, to grow their empire. So I would certainly say that's a commonality of all of them. One of the reasons it's difficult to answer is because I've interviewed such a diverse amount of guests on purpose. So I've interviewed like David Icke and Katie Hopkins, who are, a lot of people have actually said, why did you interview those? Maybe you shouldn't have interviewed those. By the way, when people say that, that makes me realize that's a good guest, because the concept is disruptive. And then I've interviewed, world champions, and then I've interviewed billionaires. I've interviewed dragons, and I've interviewed comedians, and all different ranges of people. And therefore you get a nice breadth of knowledge. I asked my guests the same questions. I asked them different questions in the more organic part of the interview, but towards the end we do a quick fire round, and I always finish with, what's the best advice you ever given, the worst advice you're ever given, what's wrong with the world that you'd like to change? I asked them, what does disruptive mean to you? And a couple of other questions. So in that quick fire round, you'll get a sense of a holistic view of success across corporates, startups, scale-ups. If you want to build an empire, or just a sort of a part-time side hustle business. If you're in in management or leadership, there's something for everyone.
What is your advice to entrepreneurs at the minute, Rob?
Well, I don't really like giving advice. I like either sharing my experience or giving people some new insights and choices. Because advice kind of sounds like I'm right, other options are wrong, and it's, also has maybe a legal connotation. My job is to open people's mind, to give them more choice and to help them make the right choice for them. So I would say at the moment, what's your second pivot? So the first pivot was normal life to lockdown, but you need a second one. I'm not advising, remember, I'm getting you to think. So the second pivot is, what do we do now we go out? What's the next opportunity? So you almost got to reinvent yourself again. You've reinvented yourself hopefully 12 weeks ago. You got to reinvent yourself again. That'd be the first thing. The second thing, what are the upside opportunities in your model or your niche, or a new model or niche that you aren't seeing yet? Because if you keep searching for them, you'll find them. The next thing is, in your model or niche, where's the value? What do people want and need? Where's the new value proposition? Because if it was, in retail and now it's online, if it was in restaurants, now it's in home delivery, where's the new value proposition? Because that's where the money goes. So there are three things. I mean, I could give you 103 things, but there's three.
Oh, they're great.
Feast on.
Do you have any good predictions, Rob, for the next 3 years ahead?
I think predictions is, I was going to say a mugs game. I don't mean a mugs game. I just think that no one can predict the future. You just can't. Who could have predicted this lockdown, quarantine, virus? Even the most sage economist can't really predict the economy. So what I would say is, I'm not going to give you any predictions. What I am going to say is, you've got to be ready for anything. And by the way, being ready for anything is far better than making a prediction. Because a prediction is probably, at best, 50.1% likely to be correct, at best. Which, by the way, if you can be correct 50.1% of the time, you can probably make a shit ton of money. But if you can be ready for a boom, a bust, a dead cat bounce, a W bounce, or whatever all these people are saying in terms of the economy. If you can be ready for a second lockdown, if you can be ready for, if people are dying to do events and face-to-face again, or if they are going to remain cautious and be online. So the best way to predict the future is to create it by being ready for everything.
Completely. Rob, do you feel like we've gone into a different time recently with giving and everything? I feel like, just with your own content, with everything else that's getting pushed out, it feels like everything's moved around us. Are you seeing signs of that in your world, or?
When you say what, because you perceive I'm giving more content, is that what you mean?
You giving more content? I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people that are normally more competitive be far more free and willing to share coming out of this time that we've had. But it may just be in my sector, but I think across business, I think it seems to be changing.
Well, I think that's nice that you see that. And I think that's a reflection of what you're seeing. Because I bet you there are some people that are saying, everyone's a bit more competitive, a bit more edgy, a bit more negative. So I just think that's a sign that you have an open mind. I can only speak for me and I can't speak for anyone else. But I've definitely increased the volume of my content. I see that as, A, my responsibility in what I do. B, it helps grow my brand because there's been far more engagement in the lockdown than there was before. It's also a somewhat therapy for me. Also, I've taken control of my diary again. The lockdown helped me recompartmentalize my diary and manage my time a bit more effectively and with balance, because in the early weeks of the lockdown, I just worked from 3 a.m. till 9 p.m. And I quite enjoyed it, actually, but that's obviously not sustainable. And I always want to level up. And that is the gift and the curse of being an entrepreneur or a manager or a leader or a CEO, isn't it? It always wanted to level up. The gift is you go to that new height and that new level. The curse is you're never quite satisfied and there's always more to do and you don't celebrate the wins along the way. But, for me, I don't want to do less content. I don't want to have less followers. I don't want to make less of an impact. I want to make more of an impact. I want to go from national to intercontinental to global to intergalactic. I want to be the first guy to have a podcast on the moon or on Mars. So I'm all in. And I'm all in.
Absolutely. So Rob, do you want to give a shout out to how people can follow you, get in contact with your content for those that don't know you?
Yeah, sure. Well, if you search my name, Rob Moore, Moore, you'll find, I do daily Facebook Lives. You'll find my YouTube channel. You'll find my podcast, The Disruptive Entrepreneur. You'll find all my books, Money, Start Now, Get Perfect Later, I'm Worth More. So just search my name. And then if you like books or audiobooks or podcasts or live videos, or you like Facebook or YouTube or Instagram or whatever, I'm all over them all. I normally direct people to my podcast because that's, a nice medium to consume more content. And I've done 530 episodes, and that's called The Disruptive Entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Hey, Rob, thanks for being with us today. It's been so kind. And I look forward to catching up again soon. Cheers, Rob.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, Rob. Thanks. Take care.